I think one of the biggest takeaways from this episode is that Hamber is an absolute badass. He takes a page straight out of John Wick's playbook by walking into enemy territory solo and immediately taking control despite being outnumbered. Honestly, this isn't that surprising because we know Hamber trained all the admins except Spino, so he should be more skilled than each of them individually. But the fact that he can take on Chalce, Coral, and Sidian at the same time and actually overwhelm them is still incredibly impressive. And the best part is that he doesn't do it through brute force alone. He plays it smart. Mow Rotom is used perfectly as a fast, evasive nuisance, constantly disrupting opponents from multiple angles. Hampering them so they can't settle into the battle comfortably. Dusknoir deals most of the damage, and I love that Hamber cleverly makes up for its low speed. First, by having it use Phantom Force, and later, more significantly, by using Trick Room, which is honestly one of the few ways to make such a slow Pokemon viable. Dusknoir basically turns into Goku, darting across the battlefield at lightning speed, demolishing everything in its path, which is epic, cool, awe-inspiring, and one of my favorite parts of the episode, especially because it really sells Hamber's dominance through sheer skill and strategy. That said, one-sided battles can get stale if nothing changes. If there's no uncertainty, no question about who's going to win, the battle can start feeling predictable. But this episode avoids this because Chalce refuses to go down easily. She smartly has Medicham use Calm Mind repeatedly while dodging attacks, meaning that they circumvent the usual downside of charging or building up power, which is of course that you leave yourself vulnerable as you do so. This reminds me of Iono and Bellibolt and Nemona and Pommet doing the same thing recently. I guess this is a popular tactic? That, or they all referenced the same strategy guide. This also allows Chalce and Medicham to buy time for Trick Room to expire. Once it does, Hamber loses his speed advantage, allowing a powered-up Medicham to completely turn the battle around by defeating both Rotom and Dusknoir. This is honestly fantastic because it shows that Chalce is also genuinely skilled and smart. She isn't just relying on strong spheres. She understands the battlefield timing, and she knows how to turn a bad situation into an advantage. It also makes the battle much more engaging because suddenly Hamber is the one in trouble. He loses his only two Pokemon. So for a moment, it really feels like he might be cooked. But then comes one of the biggest surprises of the episode. Hamber actually has a third Pokemon, and not just any Pokemon. Bloodmoon Ursaluna. This reveal is amazing. The episode is literally called Hamber on the Night of the Blood Moon, so having Bloodmoon Ursaluna appear under the moonlight, hidden by haze with only its glowing red eye visible at first, is just perfect. It feels ominous, intimidating, and incredibly cool, not to mention fitting. Ursaluna also adds more value and importance to Hamber and Diana's trip to Kitakami, because it turns out that Diana is not the only one who got a special Pokemon from said trip. Bloodmoon Ursaluna absolutely delivers. It immediately overwhelms the admin trio. Its signature move, Bloodmoon, looks incredible, and it just feels like the terrifying, werewolf-like force of nature it is. Bloodmoon Ursaluna is one of my favorite Pokemon from Scarlet and Violet, so I'm glad that Horizons did it justice. Honestly, I think this is one of the best Pokemon debuts in this series so far. But once again, Chalce refuses to give up, which leads to the second biggest surprise of the episode. She has access to Mega Evolution, which is significant. And not just because it allows her to turn the tide yet again, this time definitively, further reinforcing that she is very smart and capable, since Medicham defeats Ursaluna because Chalce cleverly has it strike Ursaluna's weak spot with a super effective axe kick after using Ursaluna's own night vision against it to bait it into leaving itself open, but also because Mega Evolution requires a strong bond between trainer and Pokemon. The very thing strong spheres can erode, removing trainers from the equation and forcing Pokemon to battle solo like machines. This is exactly what Hamber wants them to understand. He isn't here to beat them up. He's here to, even if by force, talk sense into them and remind them that they too have bonds with their Pokemon that they value. Now, Coral and Sidian already had doubts back in episode 125, and Hamber makes them hesitate further. Chalce, however, refuses to listen to him, which is ironic and interesting since the fact that she can use Mega Evolution proves that she does have a real bond with Medicham, a bond she clearly values even if she refuses to admit it. The battle itself proved that she doesn't need the strong spheres. She is skilled, smart, and capable of fighting at a very high level without them. And if she does need a boost, she has Mega Evolution, so why use a strong sphere? The contradiction between what she says and claims to believe in, and her actions and capabilities, is fascinating. Now, while Hamber technically loses, he still fulfills his objective. He pushed them to their limits, challenged their ideology, and got his point across. He absolutely delivers his final lesson to his former students. You can't really ask for much more, especially considering he was outnumbered and outgunned. Also, I love that he ultimately manages to escape because of Ursaluna, which makes it and its role even cooler. Moreover, I've said before that I think Coral and Sidian will betray Spino. Well, I now believe this more than ever. This episode also gives us something the explorers have needed for a while: more backstory. Unfortunately, in the case of Coral and Sidian, while it's nice to learn more about them, their backstory is not exactly shocking or compelling. Coral was a troublemaker that enjoyed making Glalie self-destruct, while Sidian was an intimidating tough guy, always looking for strong opponents. they haven't changed too much, and joining the Explorers mostly just gave them a purpose and a direction for who they already were. Chalce, on the other hand, has a far more interesting backstory because her past self was almost completely different from who she is now. She used to be a teacher at a small school. She cared about her students, and she seemed more hopeful, happy, and positive. Not to mention kinder. But the school was forced to close due to lack of funds. She joined the Explorers to fulfill her wish of creating a respectable school in her hometown. This gives her a much more tangible, significant, and even noble reason for joining the Explorers. It doesn't make what she's doing right, but it does make it more understandable. Now, it makes sense why she is so desperate to stay loyal to Spinel and believe in the strong spheres, even though she clearly has doubts. She has a meaningful dream she would do anything for. Moreover, the contrast between who she was and who she is now makes her a more fascinating character and one with more depth. And I also love that this finally explains why Hamber called her sensei back in episode 110. At the time, it felt strange because Hamber was the one who trained her, so if anything, you'd expect her to call him sensei. But now we know he was literally calling her teacher because that's what she used to be. As for my thoughts on the battle itself, from a visual and a technical perspective, I think it's pretty good for the most part, with some standout moments like Dusknoir going bananas and Bloodmoon, but nothing groundbreaking. The animation and choreography are fine, but not remarkable. What really carries this battle is how satisfying it is to see Hamber finally go on the offensive, especially with how well he battles despite having the deck stacked against him. Additionally, I always enjoy battles that feature clever strategies and smart, cool tactics, because they are creative and engaging enough to make up for issues in the visual and the technical departments. Moreover, the fact that the tide shifts more than once, twice in surprising fashion, means that it certainly was a battle that never got stale or predictable and remained exciting the whole way through. Finally, a few smaller details I liked. First, strong spheres are finally released, which immediately makes the threat real, raising the stakes. It's one thing to know what Liko and the others are trying to stop, but it's another thing to actually see regular trainers all over the world buying and using strong spheres. Second, Spinel and Chalce mentioned Naranja Academy banning strong spheres, which was a small win for Liko and friends in episode 126, but clearly it mattered. This shows that even the smaller victories they've gotten along the way are still noticed and have an effect, which is great. It adds value to the journey. Lastly, it turns out that I was right about the remaining Terra types. Cap, Cerulege, Pecharunt, Hatterene, Kilowattrel, and the Tinkaton will provide Flying, Ghost, Poison, Psychic, Electric, and Steel respectively. Seeing all 18 Terra types finally laid out is really satisfying, partly because my predictions were on point, and partly because the pieces for the final battle are finally falling into place. So, overall, this was an awesome episode. Hamber was an absolute badass, Bloodmoon Ursaluna had an incredible debut, Chalce became a much more interesting character, we finally got some backstory for her, Coral, and Sidian, and the battle worked extremely well because of the strategy, the constant momentum shifts, and the ideological conflict behind it. Strong Spheres going public makes the threat feel more urgent than ever, and Liko and friends take a big step in their preparation for the final battle. All in all, a thoroughly enjoyable and significant episode. As always, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so very much for watching, and let's meet again in the next video.